The Forgotten Hotel. The old Crescent Hotel stood deep in the mountains, abandoned for decades. Once a luxurious retreat, it had been left to rot after a series of strange and terrifying events drove everyone away. People spoke of lights flickering on in the empty rooms, ghostly figures peering out from cracked windows, and screams echoing from within its decaying halls. No one dared to go near it, except for 4 friends: John, Rachel, Mark, and Lucy. They were avid ghost hunters, always searching for places with the darkest histories. And Crescent Hotel, with its infamous reputation, was a challenge they couldn't resist. On a cold autumn night, they packed their cameras, EVP recorders, and flashlights, heading out to the remote location. The road twisted through dense forests, the trees closing in on them as they neared the hotel. Finally, the massive, looming structure came into view. It stood in eerie silence, partially hidden by the overgrown vegetation that had crept up its sides. As they approached the entrance, the wind picked up, whispering through the broken windows like lost souls calling out from the other side. The front door was ajar, as if it had been waiting for them. John pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. The grand chandelier that once sparkled now hung in tatters, its crystals dull and lifeless. Torn wallpaper and broken furniture littered the lobby. "This place is perfect," Mark said, setting up his camera. "Let's see if the stories are true." They split into pairs to explore the hotel. John and Rachel took the upper floors, while Mark and Lucy stayed on the ground level. As they climbed the creaking staircase, Rachel's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The hallways were lined with closed doors, each room holding its own dark secrets. John and Rachel entered the first room they found. It was a large suite, once grand, but now filled with dust and cobwebs. The bed was still made, as if waiting for guests that would never come. An old, cracked mirror hung on the wall. As Rachel examined it, she saw something move behind her, a faint shadow darting across the reflection. She spun around, but the room was empty. "Did you see that?" she whispered. "See what?" John asked, focused on adjusting his equipment. "There was something behind me, in the mirror." John looked at the mirror but saw nothing unusual. It's probably just your imagination. Let's move on." But Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. The deeper they went into the hotel, the heavier the atmosphere became. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the temperature seemed to drop with each step. Faints echoed through the hallways, soft footsteps, distant whispers, and the creak of old floorboards. Meanwhile, on the ground floor, Mark and Lucy were exploring the dining area. The long tables were covered in dust, the chairs knocked over as if the guests had fled in a hurry. An old grand piano stood in the corner, its keys yellowed and cracked. Lucy ran her fingers over the keys, producing a discordant melody that echoed unnervingly through the room. As the notes faded, they heard a faint humming. It was a child's voice, soft and melodic, coming from somewhere deeper in the hotel. Lucy froze, her heart racing. "Did you hear that?" she asked. Mark nodded, his face pale. "It's coming from the kitchen." They slowly made their way toward the sound. The kitchen door creaked open, revealing a room filled with old, rusted appliances. The humming grew louder, more distinct. It was coming from a dark corner of the room. Mark shone his flashlight, revealing a small, dusty doll sitting on the floor. Its eyes were clouded, its dress torn and stained. But the most disturbing part was that its mouth was moving, as if singing the haunting tune. Suddenly, the humming stopped, replaced by silence so thick it was deafening. Lucy took a step back, but the doll's head snapped toward her, its eyes now clear and focused, glaring directly at her. The lights flickered, and the kitchen door slammed shut on its own. Panic set in as they tried to force the door open, but it wouldn't budge. The humming returned, louder and more menacing. The doll's head began to turn slowly, spinning all the way around as if its neck were broken. Mark and Lucy pounded on the door, desperate to escape. Finally, with a loud crack, the door flew open, and they stumbled back into the hallway, breathless and shaken. Upstairs, John and Rachel had reached the 3rd floor, where the hotel's most luxurious suites were located. The floor was covered in dust, and the air was thick with the scent of mold. As they passed by one room, they heard faint crying from inside. The door was slightly ajar. Rachel pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit room with a single figure sitting in the corner. rocking back and forth. It was a woman dressed in an old-fashioned nightgown, her long hair obscuring her face. The crying grew louder, filled with sorrow and despair. Rachel's hand trembled as she reached out to touch the woman's shoulder. The moment her fingers made contact, the crying stopped abruptly. The woman's head snapped up, revealing a ghastly face. Eyes sunken, skin pale and stretched tight over her bones, her mouth twisted in a grotesque grin. The lights flickered, and the woman let out a bone-chilling scream. Her body contorted unnaturally as she lunged at Rachel. John grabbed her hand and pulled her out of the room, slamming the door behind them. They ran down the hallway, the woman's screams echoing in their ears. The group reconvened in the lobby, all of them pale and visibly shaken. "We need to get out of here," John said, his voice trembling. "This place is evil." But as they headed for the exit, the front doors slammed shut, locking them inside. The chandeliers began to sway, the lights flickering wildly. The whispers returned, surrounding them, growing louder and more menacing. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, darting just out of sight. The air grew colder and a thick fog began to fill the room. Shapes formed in the mist, twisted figures with hollow eyes and distorted faces. The group huddled together, terror gripping their hearts. The shadows crept closer, reaching out with ghostly hands, their touch icy and filled with malice. "Get away from us!" Lucy screamed, swinging her flashlight wildly, but it passed through the figures as if they were made of smoke. The hotel groaned as if it were alive, its walls closing in on them. The floorboards creaked, and a low, rumbling sound echoed through the building. The whispers grew into a deafening chorus of voices, all chanting the same words. "You belong to us now. You can never leave." Suddenly, the floor beneath them cracked, and they felt themselves falling. The world spun into darkness as they tumbled down into a pit of shadows, the cold hands of the spirits clawing at them, pulling them deeper into the abyss. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves back in the lobby. The fog had cleared, and everything was silent once more. The doors stood open, beckoning them to leave. Without a word, they ran out of the hotel, not daring to look back. As they drove away, the lights in the hotel flickered on one last time, and they saw the shadowy figures standing at the windows, watching them leave. But even as they escaped, they couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed them. The whispers still echoed in their minds, growing louder each night. Months later, one by one, they began to disappear. First Mark, then Lucy, and finally John. Rachel was the last. She was found in her home, sitting in front of a mirror, muttering the same words over and over. "You can never leave. You can never leave." The Crescent Hotel still stands, waiting for its next visitors. But those who dare to enter never truly leave, for the spirits that haunt it are always hungry for new souls to drag into their eternal nightmare. This story captures the dread of a place where malevolent forces are in control, where the line between the living and the dead blurs, trapping those who dare to enter. Sometimes curiosity leads to a fate worse than death, a fate where escape is impossible and you become one of the lost souls haunting the forgotten corridors.